If you really think about it, it's extremely surprising and quite rare that you have a hardcore activist, like one person who wears an orange jumpsuit and tries to climb the CN Tower in order to say that we need to save the trees or save the planet because that's a good demonstration for climate change. That activist, well, he sits in Parliament. His name is Guilbeault, and chances are you already know this. I just like to add a little bit of dramatic flair to it. Pierre Poilievre pretty much brings a grown man, Guilbeault, to his knees and cry with cold, hard facts. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I want to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, here is this very anticipated clip of Pierre Poilievre just sending him packing, man. Go back and climb the CN Tower. Get out of here. Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
The economic vandalism of this Prime Minister and the carbon tax cover-up have been exposed today. After Conservative pressure, the government finally revealed the data that was missing, the real cost of their carbon tax above the cost at the pump is $30 billion, nearly $2,000 for every Quebec family. The government has tried to destroy the parliamentary budget officer's reputation to hide this information. Why? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've already agreed in this House that math isn't the Conservative Party's strong suit, especially the leader of the Conservative Party. I know that counting above 6 is hard for him. That's the number of affordable housing units that he built when he was Minister of Housing. But the data prove it. I have them here. 8 out of 10 families receive more from the carbon price than they pay. And in addition, the Parliamentary Budget Officer confirmed that 25 million tons in reductions are thanks to the carbon price. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, this minister hid data that show $30 billion in cost for the Canadian economy every year. In Quebec, it's $5 billion. According to line 17, column AN. Yes, a cost for Quebecers, and the Bloc has voted for increasing this tax. Why has the government tried to destroy the reputation of the Parliamentary Budget Officer when he was telling the truth? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we have evidence of the ignorance of the Conservative Party of Canada on the issue of climate change, because the carbon price at the federal level does not apply to Quebec. The Quebec system is in place. There are members of the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition just needs to look around him. 3 rows behind him, just a little bit to his left. He'll be able to talk to someone who voted in favor of the carbon price in Quebec, Mr. Speaker. So he just needs to ask for explanations. If he can't provide them, I will. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The economic vandalism and carbon tax cover-up of this government has now been exposed because of a relentless Conservative pressure. The government finally leaked out to the CBC the economic hit Canada will take, originally reported at $20 billion. With inflation, it's $30 billion a year, or almost $2,000 for every single family in Canada, something they tried to silence the Parliamentary Budget Officer from exposing. How can we believe anything this Minister of Environment has to say on taxes?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my honourable colleague and friend, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, often says in this House, the Conservative Party of Canada are entitled to their opinion, not their own sets of facts, Mr. Speaker, and the facts are clear. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back from carbon pricing than it cost them. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, but the data also shows that carbon pricing is already responsible for the reduction in pollution level by 25 million tons. That's half of our emission reduction so far, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's not my numbers, it's his numbers.
Exactly.
His own department just released data moments ago showing that the real cost will be $30 billion in hit to our economy. This is above and beyond the direct cost at the pumps and on people's heating bills. Now, when the parliamentary budget officer said this, he denied it. Right. He tried to gag the parliamentary budget officer and shut him up completely. Why did this minister try to hide the facts and punish a legitimate, hardworking public servant who tried to tell the truth?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we've established in this House that math was not the forte of the Leader of the Opposition, and that he has a hard time counting past 6, Mr. Speaker, which is the number of social housing he did when he was Minister responsible for housing. But the facts are clear. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back from carbon pricing than the pricing system costs. Not only that, but carbon pricing is responsible for half of our emission reduction, 25 million tons less pollution in the atmosphere in Canada because of carbon pricing, Mr. Speaker.
It's a odd salmon-colored suit.
8 out of 10 fact does not include the $30 billion of economic costs. That is $2,000 of additional costs for every single family. When we exposed that, he denied it. When the parliamentary budget officer reported on it, they attacked him and tried to gag him. Mr. Speaker, that minister is not worth the economic vandalism. We cannot believe a word he says about taxes. He needs to resign. When will the Prime Minister fire him?
There you go, man. Drop some W's in the chat. You know what? Wake up, everybody. Wake up. Let's go. Show them we're alive.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noted in the discussion yesterday the Leader of the Opposition's newfound respect for economists. Well, let me tell him, 300 economists, in addition to the PBO, say 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back. It works directly inverse to income. This Leader of the Opposition ignores the costs of climate change. Mr. Speaker, here are the facts. His climate plan is to let the planet burn. It is to ignore the economic opportunities associated with the energy transition. And look, this is a fellow who ran in the last campaign on putting in place a carbon price. Who is telling the truth?
Order.
Well, he must be pretty upset with his boss then, right? Who just flew across
Order.
the world to Italy.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. In the supplementary estimates of the budget, this government wants to allocate an additional $3.5 million for medals to mark the transition of the Crown in Canada to Charles III. Yet, there was already more than $22 million earmarked for this. It may seem like $22 million too much, but the Governor General didn't think it was enough. 15% more was needed, she thought, and the government agreed. They've got one last chance to wake up before next week's vote. Will they withdraw these votes and avoid wasting millions of dollars on monarchist trinkets? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I know the Bloc is not very interested by this, but there are Canadians who care about our history and who want to recognize that our sovereign, who passed away, was the Queen of the Commonwealth for over 70 years. This is a tradition in Canada when it happens. There are medals produced and distributed for those interested in it. So, Mr. Speaker, we respect traditions, and it's unfortunate for the Bloc. Most of them refused to have people in their own ridings receive this. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. What's worse, the extra $3.5 million for medals bearing the effigy of Charles III are in the same votes as the funds finally released for drinking water for Indigenous communities, which could have used the extra money. It's pathetic. Frankly, when you consider that Quebecers and even a majority of Canadians want nothing to do with the monarchy, that's a lot of people who think this money would have been better used in Indigenous communities. Will the government withdraw this money from the votes while there's still time? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, we see that the Bloc is still looking to create arguments with these stories. But people in their own ridings, there are a number of them who would like to be able to mark the transition in the monarchy. They won't be able to because they've decided ideologically to deprive their constituents of these medals. We offer them across Canada. It's really unfortunate for my Quebec friends. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, all the experts agree. Everyone agrees. The third link for cars is not a good project. It's too expensive. It will pollute, all of that to save 5 minutes in traffic. We know that for the Bloc and the Conservatives, it doesn't matter. They support it. But for the NDP, the third link is a no-go. A viable, green and efficient solution is the tramway. Can the Liberals guarantee that not a single public cent, not a cent, will go to the third link, but instead investments will go to environmentally friendly solutions for Quebec City like the tramway? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind my colleague from the NDP that this is a provincial discussion, a provincial project. What the Government of Canada has said is that we will always be there for transit projects. Why? Because that's the way of the future. The Conservatives want to eliminate transit projects. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in fighting climate change. They do absolutely nothing. Whereas we support transit projects.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
For decades, Liberal and Conservative governments have ignored Indigenous people's needs. As a result, the infrastructure gap is at billions of dollars. The Liberals committed to closing the gap by 2030, but have committed less than 1%. This is just pennies. Indigenous peoples deserve the same housing, roads, and clean water as others. When will the Liberals follow through on their promises and close the gap so Indigenous peoples can thrive?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with the member that this country has had a deplorable history of depriving Indigenous communities of the things that they need to thrive. In fact, since we've taken office, and spending on Indigenous infrastructure and priorities has increased by 185%, Mr. Speaker. It speaks to the lack of effort by those Conservatives when they were in government to actually prioritize the needs of Indigenous children. We'll keep working to close that gap.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. $30.5 billion. $30.5 billion per year. That's what the Bloc Liberal tax is costing our economy every year. That's nearly $2,000 in cost per family that the Minister of the Environment wanted to hide. The Minister of the Environment knew it. He voluntarily hid the numbers from Canadians. After having voluntarily hid those numbers, will the Minister of the Environment have the courage to stand up before all Canadians and resign for not having told them everything? The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. Mr. Speaker, this member from Quebec will never, never do what the Minister of the Environment, also from Quebec, has done for Canada by presenting a credible plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And will respect the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement they want to withdraw from. It's no surprise that this member wants to withdraw us from a plan that favors 8 out of 10 Canadians and will help us reach our targets on climate change, Mr. Speaker. That member should be ashamed. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. He's quite right. Never, ever will I hide $5 billion in costs for a carbon tax from Quebecers, because that's exactly what the Minister of the Environment has done. In his own documents, line 17, column AN, the carbon tax costs Quebecers $5 billion per year. The tax supported by the Bloc Québécois. Mr. Speaker, after wanting to make fun of the parliamentary budget officer who was telling the truth, we know now. Will the Minister of the Environment step down?
Jeez, man, they keep telling them that they need to resign.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will never be ashamed of being there for Canadians. Standing up for their rights to clean water, clean air, a high-quality environment, as opposed to the Conservatives. The ignorance of the Conservative Party on this issue, Mr. Speaker, is boundless. He just needs to look around him. If he speaks to the member seated behind him, she can explain that Quebec has its own carbon pricing system before the federal government did. And there are many Conservative members who voted in favor of carbon pricing at the provincial level. This is nonsense.
That's where we're going to end this video. I would love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. And once again, on your way out, I would like to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. And when you subscribe, there's a little bell icon that shows up. If you can just click and tap that, that'll add a layer of insurance so you can be notified of upcoming videos. We will see you in the next one. Bye for now.